Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Sean Combs is found not guilty on 3 out of 5 charges. And today I've brought in 2 of the sharpest minds in criminal justice to help make sense of it all. Dr. Ann Burgess, the most legendary pioneer of criminal profiling who shaped how the FBI hunts predators. And Karen Conti, the attorney who's defended some of the most infamous psychopaths alive. What really happened? Was justice served, or did power win again? Let's find out. All right, Dr. Ann and Karen, let's just dive in on the first verdict. That was sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. He was found not guilty on both charges for Cassie and for Jane.
I was hoping that they could get him on this verdict. So I am anxious to see what we need to do better to get it across to people about sex trafficking. I know it's a little bit difficult to kind of understand that as a, if you will, as a concept, but where are we missing the boat? Was it was it the consent issue? What was it? I think it'll be really important to find out what that is so that we can better educate around that, whether it's educating juries or helping women, of course, to be able to articulate. I think that was a big disappointment that he was not found guilty on that charge.
Yeah, one of the defenses in their closing statement, they actually says, like, they're swingers. This is their lifestyle. Cassie wanted to do this. This is how they're close. This was her lifestyle choice too. So unfortunately, it is somewhat of a defense. Karen, what do you make of that? And then how do we think through the difference between someone's lifestyle, where they are having these sexual escapades, all the way to now this is actually a criminal act?
Well, I think that the average juror has a hard time understanding why someone stays in there. Why the people like Cassie will write letters to Sean saying, I can't wait to do this again, and to voluntarily go into these horrific scenes where people are doing unspeakable things to you. It's hard for a woman to understand how anyone would voluntarily do that, or how they would find themselves in a situation where they feel compelled to do that. That is very, very hard for people to understand. Add to it that the defense did a very good job, in my view, of cross-examining, saying, you were in it for the money. You wanted to be famous. You wanted his affection. You could have walked away. You took those drugs voluntarily. No one forced them on you. So when you add up all of those things, the average person who maybe doesn't understand the brainwashing and the dominance and control and the pervasive nature of that, they're going to say no, beyond a reasonable doubt. No, I can't say that he coerced her. And I understand that verdict.
Yeah, I mean, I have another quote that he actually said in his closing statements. So he says, this trial is about love. This trial is about jealousy. So much about jealousy. So much about jealousy. And just keeps repeating it. It's all about infidelity. So, Dr. Ann, how do we start to think through this? Because I do believe there is some element there. I do think that is potentially why Cassie stayed, because she felt like she loved him. The jealousy is part of that emotion. Where is that fine line between being jealous, staying for love, and this is now a criminal act and he should be charged with it?
That's exactly where you have to try to tease apart what is what. It certainly is not love. I don't know why the love. I think that the defense is very helpful, and I certainly would agree with Karen on that they were so successful to push it and to over repeat. That is certainly a technique that this wasn't a criminal trial. This was love, or this was, I'm surprised they used love, but I guess obviously they did. And they got away with it. And I think that that's the way a lot of people will see this. They don't understand coercion. They don't understand. It's important on the drugs thing. You know, people take drugs for a lot of things. You have a headache, you take a drug, right? And it goes away. It gets you through. And drugs get them through the experience. And I think that's something that we don't emphasize enough. It's not, so how do you explain that as, as love, or as going along, whether consent? I always felt the consent issue that I certainly heard on some of it was important. What is consent? We, I think, need to, what is consent and what is exploitation? It's clearly the exploitation, and that they will do that the men will do that to these women. and to understand that as they really hate women. And people will say, well, how can they do it? Look at, they give them all this attention and this love and the money and so forth. How can they hate them? Well, they do. So we have to push that more, the misogynist aspect.
Yeah, and a lot of men that I speak to just don't understand, to your point, Dr. Ann. They say, well, why wouldn't she leave? She is an adult. If it's a child, it's a totally different matter, right? They don't have the wherewithal to defend themselves. But if she's an adult, if she has said, I love you, if there are messages, if she's agreed to take drugs, right? Like, I'm really trying to pull over the veil that people just aren't seeing. And before I've heard about the verdict, people asked me, Lisa, do you think he'll be convicted? And I said, unfortunately, I don't think people quite understand coercive control enough for him to be convicted on this. So you nod your head, Anne. What do we do about that? Like, how do we even, if they're not allowed to talk about coercive control in the court because it's not technically illegal, how do we work around it? And I mean, again, are we surprised that this is a not guilty verdict?
Well, it's a major concept, and I couldn't agree with you more that we have got to, maybe we need to be asking women more about the how controlled are you in this relationship? Maybe you don't have to say, are you being coercively controlled, but how is the control? What is the division of checks and balances, so to speak? We don't do that, and maybe we should be. There should be a different way of asking and talking about relationships and who's doing what and what are you getting for what you're doing, kind of thing, because that's really what it comes down to. Is they argue that they're just going along with it so that they can have their rent paid or that they can have the power. The power and being with someone famous, don't forget, is a very powerful feeling, and you can see everyone wants to feel as though they're admired and having attention paid. So there's so much weight in that area versus the coercion, the negative, and what they have to do. I am surprised that they can put up with the multiple men. That I think seems rather unusual, that they weren't able to get that well, because the defendant certainly got the men to come in and do what he wanted them to do. So in his own way, he's also controlling them, paying them, of course. But I think the dynamics, we haven't gotten that across. The dynamics we should be talking more about, and use this case as a very good example of that. I think it's got to be used in a positive way rather than just feeling that it was, you got 2 out of 5. Maybe that's certainly better than 0 out of 5.
I was going to say, I would like to add to that maybe we explain a little bit better, if possible. This isn't just Cassie ended up doing this on a videotape. That's not how it worked. First of all, she was preyed upon. She was selected by a narcissist, a malignant narcissist. Sorry, Anne, those are your terms, not mine. But she was selected for a bunch of good reasons. She needed something from him. She somehow was without support around her to fight back on some of these things. And he instinctively knew that she was a person that he could get away with this. And so then you start breaking it down. You start breaking down her confidence, and you start filming her. And then you say, hey, do you want these things out in the public? I could make or break your career. I could take everything you have right now and throw it in the trash. And you know there was all of that. So it was a process to get her, select her, break her down, and then she probably looks back and thinks to herself, what was I thinking? Why did I think I had to do that? She wasn't even herself at the time. And this is very common with domestic violence, bad relationships. You look back and you say, how did I get there? But you did.
Yeah, she did. So somebody at some point called this to her attention. I mean, you laid out so well. I mean, maybe she isn't seeing it at the time. Does she see herself being exploited, being manipulated, being used, really is being used?
Yeah, well, one of the things that the defense used is this is all about regret. This is about, in the moment, you loved it, you were having fun. Sure, there were moments that you weren't happy, but it's part of a relationship. And so what do you think about that as the argument?
The argument is, how does he know? How does the defense know? Why does he pick that? He picks something that people can relate to. The problem I see in some of these cases is who does the person watching the interaction identify with? Do they want to say, I'd never do that? So and when you get people not identifying, we always try to, certainly like in rape cases and others, identify with the victim so you know what you went through. And they're doing just the opposite. I'd never think of that. I'd be able to walk away. I'd find something else. That must be what is their background. Maybe Karen can talk about that is that a strategy that's useful?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that people do not relate to these women. And I think women maybe were even less able to stretch and think about it. Because does the average woman think she could ever, not to be gross, but open up your mouth and have urine, squirted in your mouth? I mean, really, having multiple men, go at you, having all of this on video for hours at a time, days at a time, you had to take you had to rehydrate because you were doing it for 24 hours straight and staying up and not sleeping. I mean, you can't imagine this, right?
Right.
And so you're right. Dr. Ann is right that the person you always want as a trial lawyer to get your jury to empathize with you, to understand your client, to understand you as a lawyer even about why you're saying things and how you're doing things. Because when they can relate, they start nodding their heads. And I know I've tried cases where once the jurors start nodding their heads, I know I have them.
Yeah.
I know I have their empathy, their compassion, and their feeling like they're aligned with me and my client. And that probably didn't happen in this trial. And I'm really anxious to see if these jurors talk and how much they're going to tell us about how they maybe didn't relate to these women.
Good question. Great question. And it was 8-4. Do I have it right?
You've got 8 men. You only have 2 of those men are in their 30s. You've only got 1 in their 40s, 1 in their 50s, and then the rest are in their 60s. And then for women, you only have 1 in their 30s, 2 in their 40s, and 1 woman is 74 years old. One of the arguments, I think it was Andrew Bustamante, the CIA that we had on this show. I think he was the one that said, "But think about how people at different ages think about consent."
Right. So they strategized well. Probably had a jury consultant that had done some research on it. Because the minute I heard that ratio, I said, doesn't sound good. Is this really her peers?
Yeah, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm 46, or about to be 46, and I grew up in a world where you get on the bus, someone's going to pinch your ass. It's like, you don't like it, but it is the way that I grew up. Now, nowadays, that is so frowned upon, it would never happen. So when we think about consent, if you're 50 or older or 60 or 70 and you're male, maybe you think about it a little differently. So in case anyone's not familiar, he was charged on 5 counts. Number 1 was racketeering conspiracy. He was found not guilty. Sex trafficking when it comes to Cassie, he was found not guilty. Transportation to engage in prostitution when it comes to Cassie, guilty. Sex trafficking when it comes to Jane, not guilty. And transportation to engage in prostitution when it comes to Jane, guilty. And there's one thing here. I always want to play devil's advocate because it is very important to me to figure out how women never get silenced again. And there are certain things here that I'm like, they've kind of got a point. I hate that they have a point, but they kind of have a point. To help me think through this. So one of the arguments, especially when it came to Jane, is that it was like they were making their own homemade porn. And what's wrong with that? And if you're traveling, if you pay, this isn't a quote, but this is the gist, if you pay for a porn star to go to Miami and shoot a porn movie, and they're doing all of these things, it's not considered illegal. So why would it be illegal for Diddy to pay for people to go to a different state and film sex videos?
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I mean, crossing state lines makes it a federal event, and there's always been that crossing state lines for immoral purposes type argument that the law is broken in a different way when you cross the state lines. But this is just, this line that we're drawing here is just so hard because we do have willpower and we do have self-will. And we can say no, unless we're in chains or unless we're being beaten or poisoned or whatever. And so this is just hard to understand why anyone would participate in any of these things other than for money, advantage, etc. And those kinds of reasons make the quote victims look bad, and maybe even victimize the defendant himself. I mean, P. Diddy acting like the victim, which is what happens with narcissists. They become the victim. They create all kinds of chaos. They break people down. They harm people. And then they become the victim. And everyone starts nodding their head and saying, yeah, he's the victim. So this is kind of a microcosm of narcissism to me, this trial, because it got, in my view, a little bit turned on its head in who's the victim and who's the perpetrator.
Okay, well, now moving on to your positive side, Dr. Anne, as you were saying, is like, well, at least he got convicted of a couple of things. So let's touch on that, because I don't want this whole episode to be, extremely sad over the 3 that he didn't, that he was found not guilty. So he was actually found guilty for transportation to engage in prostitution. That right now is roughly around 10 years. He hasn't been sentenced yet at the time of this recording. A lot of that comes to, there was a lot of somewhat evidence of just paper evidence. It's like you see the receipts, you see where the money comes from, you see all these things. So it didn't quite surprise me that this was the one that he was found guilty on. What do you guys think about this specific offense? And as a woman, how you can actually maneuver if you find yourself in this situation? Because again, I want to make sure that we're always grounding this on, if any woman's watching right now, how they can make sure they don't get stuck.
I mean, that at least they had that. They couldn't refute that evidence. I mean, that's what it sounds like. So they didn't need any of the women or the men. Don't forget they were paying and prostituting men. It isn't just the women. So I'm sure some of those receipts were for that, paying for those. I forget what they call them. I don't know. Do you agree, Karen, that it's just?
Yeah. I think it's pretty basic. I mean, there was prostitution and you're transporting people to commit prostitution. And frankly, I think from the average person's standpoint, that doesn't sound like a big crime, right? Because we know prostitution goes on all the time. We know prostitution is not always prosecuted. We know, sometimes the women are not prosecuted because they're victims. But it just, because of the transportation, this makes it a little bit higher a crime. And again, the judge is going to have to sentence Sean Combs based upon a lot of things. Is he a danger to others? Is he, how were other people who were convicted of this crime treated? And he could get 10 years for each of those counts, and it could be consecutive as far as I can see under New York law, which means that he could do 20 years in prison. But my guess is that no man has ever been sentenced to 20 years for some kind of prostitution. That would just be overkill. And I think this judge is going to have to be fair. I mean, the judge has seen the trial, has heard the evidence, and understands that Combs is not a nice guy, not a good man, but he's going to be compelled to do what's fair here.
Well, so I've got a question. A comment that I get a lot in our episodes that we've done so far, a lot of people have said, why isn't Cassie being charged? And then the second part is, for Cassie, why would somebody do that unwillingly?
Ghislaine Maxwell, right? I mean, people recruit others to do their bidding. We've seen this with serial killers. Gacy had 2 young men who were doing his bidding. The Candyman down in Texas had 2 young men who were procuring young boys, were helping kill and hide the bodies in the storage locker. These were young men who weren't necessarily horrible people, who just got pulled in, got manipulated, got threatened, and ended up being part of a hugely horrible set of crimes. So I think these people, they know how to manipulate. They get other people to do the things for them. They pay them well. I know that I have friends who worked for Sean Combs. He had a lot of people working for him. He had a lot of people doing his bidding. He had a lot of people he paid a lot of money to. And, he was able to get people to do exactly what he wanted when he wanted.
Sure. And that's very powerful. And he was very powerful. So I'm not surprised that was the first one that he was actually convicted of, right, Lisa?
Yeah. So he was convicted of both on the Cassie case and the Jane. So that was the 2 convictions. But out of curiosity then, Dr. Anne, when is this going to end? in the sense of you had Charles Manson. He was able to manipulate a librarian, I believe, as part of his crew, part of his cult, to then eventually go and kill a pregnant woman. Like, that is manipulation to the nth degree. How are we not now seeing it repeated over and over? I mean, Manson was how long ago? And we're still seeing the same things, and people still don't understand the depths of how that control works.
Well, I think we have to point out these cases. I think that's the only way to get that, but to actually deal with to get them to stop. One of the big problems is, what do you substitute it with in working with women? It's really very, very hard. We have to have something that fills in for that, because the attention, the money, all of that is really life-saving for them. And and for them to have to put up with, and what it does to their self-esteem is just incredible. So the more we can do to get support, to get other people on board, to get some men on board to support this and to say it's wrong, and that we, especially the coercive control, I think you couldn't be more spot on for that. That's so powerful. We don't play it enough for women. I'm going to start doing much more. I'm going to be teaching much more to do it, because they don't think of that. Of what's the control ratio when you're in a relationship?
I think that, these people, and I say these people, the R. Kellys of the world, the P. Diddys, the Epsteins, they surround themselves with yes people. They surround themselves with people who are paid to say yes, and they know that they're going to be out of the circle if they don't do exactly what the Epsteins want them to do. One of the things I think is interesting, Lisa, from a legal standpoint is, and I've dealt with this issue when it comes to cults, and I've interviewed people, there's nothing that allows even a parent of a 19-year-old who's in a cult, who's doing things that are not in his best interest because he's been brainwashed, right?
Right.
There's nothing you can do to call the police and get him out of there. There's no legal intervention that can be done unless the person's a minor, in which case you can. Or if you're so incompetent that you need to, you can actually put somebody against their will into a mental institution. But these people are not mentally ill. They've just been brainwashed, and they're doing things that are bizarre. And so the question is, when you see a Cassie and when you know about a Jane, what are your obligations as a human being, and what are your rights legally to do something that might be a strong-armed move, right? Because you could get in trouble for doing something forceful to somebody who doesn't want to do it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So it is a catch-22. You have to be really, really careful. And there's got to be somebody that's supporting you, the person that's doing it, so that you feel that it's right. And it's got to be part of a group. I think it's got to be multidisciplinary. We can't just work in isolation. We've got to get the law involved, certainly social services involved, mental health. All of that is really, really critical. Did anyone ever say no to Mr. Diddy?
So I actually have a quote from the prosecution on this. If the defendant wanted a freak-off, it was going to happen. You know why by now. He didn't take no for an answer. Obviously that's when you don't see anyone else saying no, now you're kind of the only person. And I know that that's such a big part of the cult dynamic, where it's like everybody has the same belief pointing in the same direction. And if you're the person to speak up, they all look at you like you're the odd one out, like you're the one, that's complaining or speaking up. So, Karen, I know you got to go, girl. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. Finding out this news was just horrifying. The 3 not guilties and the 2 guilties. But thank you for being here and giving your perspective.
And always good to see you. Take care. Good health to both of you.
Appreciate you, Karen. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so Dr. Anne, so we've gone over a couple of the testimonies. There's a few more things in here, though, that I'd like to kind of go over.
Sure.
So there's the thing about, let's go back to the transportation to engage in prostitution, specifically with Cassie. So he was found guilty and he will have 10 years. That, to me, is somewhat of a blessing in the sense of Cassie, her taking the stand must have been incredibly difficult.
Yes.
Her name, her face, like no one will ever forget her name. It's kind of like Monica Lewinsky. No one ever,
Yes.
How long ago was that? And now, forever her life is changed. So this woman puts herself out there. She's so vulnerable. Videos are out. People are talking about her. And so the fact that he was found guilty on this charge, I think does a bit of justice for us women
Yes.
that could find ourselves in this situation.
Yeah, I think that that's the way it's important to look at. There were 5 charges and we got 2 of them for women, which is important, and especially this one for Cassie. Is she can now hopefully serve as a role model to help other women. That's really what you hope. And whether she'll be able to or not, I know she's got, 3 little babies, so she's going to be busy. But I think that was enormously brave of her. Here she was, 8 months pregnant, came in and did very powerful testimony. And I think we should really acknowledge that and make other women feel that they could do it. If she could do it in that state, physiologically and so forth, I was always kind of holding my breath that she wouldn't go into labor or something. That
I know,
because you can, you can if you get under enough stress, and that certainly would have been. Testifying is very stressful, and I want people to really understand that any woman that comes in and is able to stand up for what's really important is very brave. It's very good.
I agree. Also, okay, so all of this, we've gone over a lot of the verdict. There's one last one, and this is one I'd really love to dive in a little more. So a lot of those other ones were based on relationships. So Cassie and Jane loving Diddy, and it kind of felt like is this a toxic relationship, or like he needs to go to prison for the rest of his life? Like, there's part of it which I think that's part of why he got away with it, because they're like, it's just love, it's jealousy, they're using all that emotion. But the last one that he was found not guilty on was actually the most severe from a result standpoint, and that's racketeering conspiracy. So if he was charged with this, he would have got over 20 years. And he was found not guilty. Now, this is where, just in case people don't know, so this is where he's using his enterprise to help him do these free coughs and things like that. So talk to me about if there's no love there. Again, it's not somewhat surprising that he was found not guilty for this, because you can potentially say it was their job. It was, yes, he was a little freaky. Yes, he had these sex things, but they were his assistants. And actually, in the closing statement, the defense turned around and said, if this was Beyonce's not going to CVS and getting her medication. So why is it any different for Diddy to have his assistants go and get the lube and all of these sex things? If it's not love, why would you stay?
Well, if it's not love, it's still the powerful, the pull, if you will, that's making them do that has to do with, I think, with money. Don't you think that that's the important thing? It's his job, if you will, in a way. The defense does pull at the thoughts that people would say, well, yeah, maybe he's got a job and we all have jobs and maybe we don't like what we're doing, but we'll go and get this and we'll go and get that and not raise any point to it. So what else could it be is one thing. The other thing is, what would the alternative be? What should they do? Do they have to give up a job and go and get something else? When all of these pluses that you've just identified are very, very, very seductive. This is very seductive kind of work that they do in a way. So they use the same things that he's doing, only in a different way. It's interesting how he puts this all together, his little enterprise, because that is getting him, that's giving him a lot of interest. My question is, how is he going to be seen after this? He still had 2, because people heard a lot about him, and even his defense lawyers had to say he's not a nice guy, but that's not what he's on trial for, about being a nice guy. So it has exposed him. It certainly has exposed and should expose other situations where there is so much of this control and coercion and pornography going on. It's very dangerous for a society. I think that that's what we have to really stress. And how young do they start? We don't, child pornography is still a big, big business, and maybe some of this starts early and creeps in. We don't know if other kinds of things are doing. So to me, it raises so many, not only moral and ethical issues, but safety for children and adolescents, especially young, what they call emerging adults. And we need to be aware of all of that and to keep it in mind.
Yeah, and we've spoken in the past on either previous Diddy episodes about the power of grooming and how he's grooming these people and he's kind of testing them. That's what you taught me, right? Where you give them one thing, you see if they do it. You give them another, you see if you do it. And that was one thing I'd like to talk to you about, because you have somebody, you have Mia, who was his assistant, and she testified on the stand that he forced sex on her and she wasn't allowed a lock. So you go from, okay, you've got this enterprise where he's got his assistants going and buying lube and, getting drugs and stuff like that. Like, all right, fine. Like, that to me is whatever. But when it comes to, you have now got such power over your team and someone underneath you, someone like Mia, who's the pseudonym because she didn't reveal her real name, my heart bleeds for her, because here she is, she gets on the stand, she reveals, again, allegedly, you just need, if you take her word for it, but she reveals the most horrifying things. And so she tells this story, she gets on the stand, she talks about how the fact that, he would trap her, she felt like, let me actually just read. So Combs once allegedly forced Mia to perform oral sex on him in an attack that made her feel like trash. The witness, so she testified, Mia also said that she was just frozen. I always thought this was the last time. Next time I would somehow be more prepared. I had to get right back to work. There was so much going on. I felt so desperate and terrified and trapped that it was all my fault.
She probably was saying to herself, it's my fault that I can't get out of this and I can't say no, because she's fearful. She could be killed. She really could.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an accident, kind of thing. But people don't realize how close they come. But the victim is, or the woman is thinking that. Everything you described is so, so dangerous. And that's why the drugs are there, so that they numb out, if you will. They don't have to think about it. How could they wouldn't do it without drugs? It would be like having a root canal without, anesthesia. Who wants to have that? So people need to think of it in that way. And it gets so normalized. I think that's the other bad thing. It gets so normalized, and it's just work, and they just routinely do what they're told to do.
Yeah.
That people should say, why is he picking me? It's because of the vulnerability. Why would he pick up someone like her? Does she think
Don't you think though, that if people are in this situation and it's almost they convince themselves that, oh my God, he's picked me. It's almost like he's so powerful, he's so rich, he's so famous. There's 100 million people that he could choose from, but he picked me. Like, do you think that that's actually part of the warp of why they then don't ask, why did he pick me, from like in the tone that you're saying?
Yeah, they don't want to think of the former, but you're right that he's telling him too. Don't forget his he's saying. I don't think all of the conversation came up, but he would be saying, "You're so special, and you're so pretty, and you're so this and that, and so forth." And so it just feeds her ego, which needs to be so that she can do it. But I wonder if they're ever asked, "Where do you think you're going to be in 5 years? When's he going to get tired of you?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, I'm obsessed with psychology. And so I think about anytime there's a moment of confusion, you kind of revert back to your baseline of how you see things, is my understanding. So what I mean by that is, you hear Mia's testimony. You hear her saying on the stand all these horrifying things that he's done to her. Like, it's not wishy-washy. There's story after story after story that she shares. And we go over it. Anyone's watching now, you can go to past episodes to look at those details. But there was one of the things that I believe it was a closing statement that the defense brought up. And he holds up a poster-sized photograph of that Mia had actually given Diddy on his birthday. And the caption underneath it said, "The coolest alien rock star unicorn pizza slice." It was like a random name that they gave him. And they're like, look, see, would they give this funny joke, amazing thing to the boss if Mia has actually been sexually assaulted? And that confusion now makes people wonder, that's actually true. And because of that confusion, you revert back to the means, and the means is, maybe he didn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the person doesn't want to give it up. I think we have to realize that they do like what is there, and they talk themselves out of it. I'm sure they're talking themselves out of it if you get a chance to really spend some time with them.
Yeah.
And they'll do anything to get in good favor, maybe make it funny, make it nice so he'll like them, kind of decentralize all of that sexual stuff. I mean, can you imagine the time that they have to do all of this? I don't know how people can think about it. I'm really glad that this all came out so that people can have an understanding of how serious and dangerous all of this stuff is.
Yeah. My concern, though, is that, because we've been talking a lot about this, me and you, we've gone over a lot of things over the past 8 weeks. And my fear is just when people hear the not guilty, it silences women again.
It does.
Because you look at someone like Cassie, Jane, Mia, Capricorn Clark, all these people who have stepped up and testified and said the most deepest, darkest, shameful, embarrassing things in order to try and get justice. And now he's been proven not guilty. Now, look, I'm never the person to like, you need to prosecute him if he's not guilty. No, if he's not guilty, then he's not guilty. I just don't believe this was an accurate verdict on everything that me and you have discussed over 8 weeks.
Well, I think that's why it's going to be very important to find out from the jurors what happened in their deliberations. How did they see it? How did they hear it? Where did we miss? I know the consent issue is they did it, and they went along with it, has got to make an impression on them, I'm sure. And as I said, you've got a 8-to-4 kind of ratio, male to female. That's a big difference. I think that there should be some assistance with how do you even the playing field. So, in something like this, should you have 6 and 6 rather than 8 and 4?
Yeah. Have you ever been a part of any type of jury selection like that?
Well, I know
Or
how
influence or giving advice?
Yeah, I know how they do them. They pretty much what you described is what age, what gender. Those are the two. You might even do racial profiling to see whether it's better to match the same race with the defendant or with the victims. In this case, it wasn't going to matter because they were both the same. But age, I think, was important. As you pointed out, I think older, you're going for the older beliefs and attitudes and bias. And they made it. In any kind of 8-to-4, you've got women that are maybe going to be outspoken to the or overspoken, I guess, to the men. Will they dare to challenge or say, no, I don't believe that happened, or whatever goes on in jury rooms? So see if you can get some juror that will be willing to just give an honest opinion.
So speaking of the jury, yesterday they started asking questions specifically. I believe it was about the racketeering specifically. And they were deliberating and they left. And according to the courts and witnesses, as the jury were leaving yesterday evening, they were unpersuadable. There was just a deadlock. They were unpersuadable. No one was budging. And then they come in this morning and within an hour, they come to a verdict. Like, help me understand what happened in your...
I was amazed that happened, right? Because you don't change that fast. Something happened between 4 o'clock yesterday and 9 o'clock today. And
what could that have been though? Like, do you have any hypothesis of what could have happened? Do you think it was pressure?
I do. I think it's pressure. They heard something, saw something, changed their mind, or somebody came in and said something that influenced the group. But I think that will come out. I think that will be something, and that's the question. What made the difference in 1 hour? Overnight.
I know.
1 hour. I mean,
it makes me wonder what happened.
Yes, and it's not, oh, the 4th of July is coming, so we got to come up with a verdict. Now, the judge, did he say anything more than just regroup and come up with a decision?
No, as far as I know, he just pressured them and he's like, you have to come
Yeah.
back, you have to regroup, you have to
Sure,
regroup.
sure.
And it makes me wonder whether there was pressure to settle, whether it was, look, they haven't been sequestered. So the jury's going home every day. You know they're talking to their family about it. There's no way they're not.
Right.
So now you can imagine, I mean, let's just take me. If someone in my world was on the jury, of course I'm going to be in their ear. Like, it's human nature to be like, ask questions, to push, to give your influence. So I don't know, I just found it a little sus that then all of a sudden they came back. And because that was the one that would have carried, I think, the highest sentence.
You don't know what the vote was before. It'd be interesting to see what the vote was yesterday afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
Was it one person holding out? Was it 3? All of that becomes, I think they can report that. I think they can.
Mm-hmm.
I know a juror, I don't know, you'd have to check on that, but that's going to be very interesting.
All right, Dr. Anne. Well,
Okay.
we have covered so many things about how we got here, how each person ended up being trapped by Diddy and his web of manipulation. We've gone deep. You've helped so many women by showing up every day and giving your advice. With this verdict of 3-2, 3 not guilty, 2 guilty, for any woman listening at home, what words can you give them so that they don't lose hope about ever speaking up if they find or see this?
Right. I think we need to be as positive as we can that this case even came forward. It's important. I don't think this would have come forward 20 years ago. And that it came through now. And I think it is a good example of attitudes that can change. We just went through the age groups. That influences, looking at what influences jurors and what they bring with them to a case is their whole background and their whole attitudes and biases. And the other thing is there were 2 positives or 2 guilties. So I think women should feel good about that, and certainly about the testimony that Mia gave and Cassie and Jane. I think that shows that women are ready to come forward on this. Again, I don't think you would have had this case 25 years ago. So we have to, and the coercive control is so clear there. And he as a misogynist who really is, and as admitted by his own defense that he was a bad guy. That tells us something about the type of situation that some women find themselves in. And it's hard to get out of, so we have to do what we can to get them out and get support for them.
And that's what you do every day. You really do just emotionally support people with your advice and your knowledge and your wisdom. And so thank you, as always, for being part of this special series and always showing up. Yeah. So
good to
appreciate you so much. Good to see you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. For 8 weeks now, we have been covering this series. We have gone from heartbreak to horror to all the things in between. And the reason why me and my team, we are busting our asses behind the scenes to keep showing up, to give you the real-time feedback of what's happening. And in all honesty, it comes back to us making sure that we can learn from it. It is heartbreaking what has happened. It is heartbreaking that these women have had to go through it. And never do we want to see this happen again. And how do we make sure that it doesn't happen again? It's right here, right now, with things like this, with guests like Dr. Anne Burgess, the legendary Dr. Anne, and the amazing people like Karen and Laura and Sarah, and all these incredible people who have shown up on this series to help give their expertise and their advice. And so I actually want to end this whole series with a beautiful quote that Cassie's attorney released today, because I think that if more women have the strength and we back them and we support them, then hopefully less of us will ever be in that scenario again. First there was Weinstein, then Epstein, then R. Kelly, now Diddy. Let's make sure that this is the last time this sort of thing happens. So with this, I close on this quote. She displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that has persisted for decades without repercussions. This case proved that change is long overdue, and we will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. So on behalf of Cassie, Jane, Mia, and all the people that were brave enough to speak up, I say thank you. And so guys, please smash that subscribe button down there, share this series, go back, watch the episodes. Let's keep learning together. If you're not following me, follow me at Lisa Bilyeu. And until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace. If you want to go deeper into Diddy's world of manipulation, then click right here and watch all the episodes that covers the trial. Weinstein, Epstein, Cosby, R. Kelly, now Diddy. Powerful men with charming on the surface and evil underneath. The signs were there, the lies, the manipulation.